There exists a singular, pivotal moment in the life of every man who is destined for mark. A moment when the internal machinery of his spirit shifts its gears and he realizes, with a cold and refreshing clarity, that he cannot continue to live as a mere cog in a wheel he did not design. This realization often arrives not in the heat of battle or the fanfare of the marketplace, but in the heavy silence of a late-hour reflection. Perhaps when the body is exhausted from the day's labor, but the mind remains restless, whispering that there must be a higher meaning to existence than the mere trading of precious hours for a meager pittance. Most men feel this discomfort, yet they stifle it. They return to the treadmill of selling their presence for a paycheck, calling it responsibility, when in truth it is a form of voluntary servitude that degrades the potential of the soul. You must understand that real wealth, the kind that brings a calm dignity and a true independence, enabling a man to become a benefactor to his race, does not emerge from the endless grinding effort of your own two hands or the simple sweat of your brow. It emerges from the creation of assets, those quiet, tireless, and mathematical machines of commerce that continue to produce value long after the initial work of the architect is completed. These are the engines of the industrial sovereign, the very bedrock of what I have termed the empire of business. The wealthy do not chase the dollar with the desperation of the hunter. They design the systems that attract the dollar with the inevitability of the magnet. They understand a truth that the common laborer ignores. If your income depends entirely upon your physical presence, your freedom is not owned, it is merely borrowed from an employer or a client, and it can be reclaimed at any moment by the whims of the market, the progress of invention, or the inevitable frailty of the human flesh. In the rigorous school of experience, which I have often called the pauper's university, we learn that the first and most sacred duty of the man of affairs is to secure a competence, a modest independence that frees the mind from the immediate, paralyzing terrors of want and the humiliating dependence upon others. But once that competence is secured, the pursuit of wealth must transform from a struggle for survival into the pursuit of systemic creation and the stewardship of resources. To be truly free, you must cease seeing yourself as a beast of burden, a mere carrier of water, and begin seeing yourself as an architect of irrigation. You must confront the uncomfortable reality that society, in its desire for a stable and obedient labor force, has trained you to believe that hard work is a virtue in itself, regardless of its direction or its outcome. But I tell you, hard work without the leverage of a system is merely exhaustion, and exhaustion is a silent thief that steals the creativity required to dream and the intellectual strength required to build. Hard work is the raw fuel of industry, but the system is the engine that converts that fuel into progress. Without the engine, the fuel is merely burned away in the open air, providing a brief, flickering heat, but no forward motion. The man of mark protects his time with a ferocity that he does not even grant to his gold, for gold can be regained through a new venture, but a wasted hour is a loss that is absolute and eternal. The purpose of your labor in this early formative stage is not to earn a living, that is the aim of the clerk, but to build the engines that will earn that living for you in the future, allowing you to devote your life to higher aims. This is the beginning of true liberation. It is the moment you decide to detach your survival from your daily toil and place your faith in the laws of capital and organization. Consider the two paths laid before every young man entering the competitive arena of business. On the first path, you are the sole source of the power. You earn only when you show up, only when you push, and the moment you cease your movement, the income stops with a thud. This is the path of the laborer, no matter how high his salary may be or how fine the cloth of his suit. Even the high-priced advocate or the esteemed physician is but a wage slave if his income ceases the moment he leaves his desk or his surgery. On the second path, your time is the seed, and the systems you build are the rich soil of the earth. You plant once with great effort, you tend the growth with unyielding discipline, and you eventually reap the fruits season after season, year after year, whether you are working in your office, resting at your hearth, or traveling across the great oceans. Most men remain on the first path not for a lack of intelligence, for many are brilliant, but for a lack of awareness and the courage to switch their allegiance from the hourly wage to the permanent asset. No one in the common schools, which are designed to produce obedient servants of industry, teaches the young that income is something you build rather than something you chase. Breaking free from this income slavery begins with a single, profound, and revolutionary question. What if my time were the architect of my income rather than the source of it? This shift in perspective is the dawn of a new life. It allows you to notice opportunities that were previously invisible to your weary eyes, skills that can be manufactured into repeatable products, and knowledge that can be codified into assets that serve the world. In this age of rapid progress and mechanical wonder, you no longer require the permission of the hereditary rich or the favor of the state to create something that outlives your physical presence. You need only the discipline to separate your identity from your hourly productivity and the resolve to start building one asset at a time with the patience of a master builder. The first step towards the freedom you have always sensed in the quiet, ambitious corners of your mind is built not on more hours of labor, but on the ownership of structure and the mastery of the will. You must cultivate the grip to hold on to your purpose when the world entices you to spend your time on trivialities or the fleeting pleasures of the senses. You must be willing to start at the very foot of the ladder, perhaps even with the broom in hand, as I did, provided that your eyes are never on the dust at your feet, but are fixed upon the mechanism of the entire enterprise. You must learn the business from the bottom up, for no man can command a system he does not understand. Once you decide to become an owner of systems rather than a mere worker of tasks, your life will never look the same again, for you have entered the mindset that transforms ordinary people into the masters of their own destiny, the creators of empires, and the ultimate stewards of the world's progress. This is the high calling of the man of wealth, to build that which lasts, to organize that which serves, and to ensure that his life is a testament to the power of disciplined thought over the chaos of random effort. If you have accepted the foundational truth that you are an agent of purpose, then you must immediately and ruthlessly reject the habit of drift, which characterizes the lives of 95% of the laboring masses. To drift is to admit that you are a mere leaf upon the wind of circumstance, a piece of industrial wreckage floating aimlessly upon the tide of chance. I tell you now, you were not sent here merely to survive through the exhaustion of your muscles. You were sent to command through the application of your mind. You were sent with a specific duty to weave your intelligence into the very fabric of the world's progress. Yet how many men do we see who live like intruders in their own lives? They walk through the great halls of commerce with an air of apology, as if they must beg for the very air they breathe or the pittance they are granted for their time. They hide the fire of their ambition as if it were a shameful secret, rather than the most sacred spark of their divinity and their utility to the race. They speak with the diffidence of a man who fears his own shadow, acting only when pushed by the threat of want, and moving only when the path is guaranteed by the signature of another. This is not the conduct of a leader. It is the slow, agonizing suicide of the character. The world, in its cold and calculating nature, often prefers you to remain in this state of manageable mediocrity. It prefers the man who can be controlled by a weekly wage, whose spirit is broken by the first sign of a market downturn, and whose horizons are limited by the walls of his station. But the man who walks with the unwavering conviction that a higher intelligence is at work within his own brain, that man is ungovernable by weakness. He does not seek the approval of the crowd, because his approval comes from the results of his own labor and the mathematical alignment of his soul with the laws of production. This truth is never heralded in the popular press, nor celebrated in the assemblies of the idle, for it is a dangerous truth to those who profit from the confusion and the dependence of others. When you begin to think as though the empire of business lives within your capacity for reason, you become a master of systems rather than a servant to them. You no longer wait for the support of friends or the favor of the state. You no longer serve the phantom of fear which keeps the majority in the shackles of poverty. You begin to walk differently, to speak with the weight of gold, and to build with the permanence of stone. Infinite intelligence is not a distant, nebulous concept hiding in the clouds of mysticism. It is the practical, creative force of the human mind when it is focused with a singular intensity. It is the logic of the steam engine, the precision of the telegraph, and the discipline of the ledger. But mark this, it will not move an inch until you move. It requires the ignition of your own will. When you carry yourself as though you have been assigned a task by the highest authority, your habits begin to reflect that reverence. You cease to waste your precious hours in the pursuit of trivialities or the barroom. You cease to entertain thoughts of failure. You understand that your words are not mere sounds, but the blueprints for your future reality. If you allow yourself to drift while these laws are being laid before you, you commit a high crime against your own potential and the progress of the race. You must listen with the intensity of a man whose life depends upon the instruction, for in the world of high affairs, it truly does. Do not be like the man who hears but does not heed, who analyzes but does not act. The truth I give you is often hidden in plain sight, obscured by the noise of modern distraction and the frantic pursuit of the immediate dollar. The wise man returns to this message daily, making it the very bread of his mental existence. He repeats to himself until it becomes a cold, hard fact of his nature. I am not here to ask, I am here to decide. I am not here to survive, I am here to build. The moment you act upon this, you cease to walk like a common man. You walk like a man who has been sent to deliver a result that only he can provide. You were not created to hesitate or to wait for a lucky break. Luck is the excuse of the failure. The successful man knows that what the world calls luck is merely the meeting of a prepared character with an inevitable opportunity. Doubt is a foreign element to your nature. It is a rust that eats away at the iron of your resolve and weakens the structure of your life. Delay is not your inheritance. It is the thief of your fortune and the murderer of your ambition. Fear is a lesson taught by the world to keep the masses in their place, but you must unlearn it through the daily exercise of your sovereign will and the application of your reason. The force that shaped the universe and established the laws of physics is the same force that fuels your desire to rise. It did not create you with uncertainty. It created you with the power to shape your environment. Most men move through their days with a hesitation in their very breath, walking lightly as if trying to avoid disturbing a world that has already dismissed them. They wait for a permission that will never come, for a sign that is already pulsing within them. But the man of mark understands that he is the sign. He walks with his fire in the open, knowing it was given to him by a power that does not manufacture weakness. Every time they negotiate with their own fear, they shrink. Every time they choose the path of comfort over the path of industry, they become spectators in their own history. Let me speak with the moral clarity of an old man who has seen the rise and fall of many empires. Failure is the inevitable result of being out of alignment with your purpose. When a man hears the call to build but clings to the safety of the shore, he must sink. There is a law that governs the rise of every great enterprise, and it begins with the authority you carry in your own spirit. You must live as a command, not a plea.
You must speak not as someone wondering if he belongs in the boardroom of life, but as one who knows he was chosen to lead it. Alignment is the only requirement for the resources of the world to flow toward you. When you align your thought, your speech, and your action with your divine assignment, the very stars in their courses will seem to fight for your cause.
To build an empire that outlasts your physical presence, you must master the most vital engine of the industrial spirit, the law of concentration. Most people go through their short lives believing that more physical effort equals more income. They believe that by working harder, staying later, and sacrificing more of their vital energy, they will eventually reach the summit of wealth. But they fail to realize that human effort, no matter how noble, has a natural and unyielding ceiling. There are but 24 hours in a day, and there is only so much nervous energy the body can expend before the machinery of the man begins to fade and fail. Effort alone may build survival, and it may provide a modest comfort for the present hour, but only systems build wealth that endures. A system is any organized mechanism, be it a business, a piece of intellectual property, a rental estate, or an automated service that continues to produce results long after the initial work of the designer is done. It is the silent engine of continuity. The wealthy understand that money does not flow to the man who works the hardest in the trenches, but to the man who builds the smartest structure above them. Think of the primitive farmer in a parched land. He can spend his entire day carrying heavy buckets of water from the distant river to his field. It is exhausting, repetitive, and entirely temporary. The moment he stops walking, his crops begin to wither. Most of humanity spends their lives carrying these buckets, trading their health for a pittance. But the man of mark, the industrial sovereign, chooses to build a pipeline. He may labor just as hard as the bucket carrier in the beginning, perhaps harder, but he is laboring with a different aim. He is building a system that, once completed, will allow the water to flow forever by the simple force of gravity and design. This is the hidden power of leverage, the silent partner behind every great fortune in our nation's history. Leverage means that your work creates a vastly greater output than the input you put in. It turns your decisions into workers and your ideas into tireless employees. Why then do most people rely on the bucket brigade of individual effort rather than the pipeline of systems? It is not for a lack of innate capacity, but because no one in the common spheres of life ever taught them the alternative. The schoolroom teaches the virtue of the task. The job rewards the completion of the hour. Society praises the visible grind. But the world quietly and handsomely pays the systems. The employee is trained by habit to think in hours and days, but the entrepreneur thinks in assets, and the man of wealth thinks in decades. Systems require a virtue that the modern world lacks, the virtue of patience. Effort gives an immediate, albeit small, result, a wage at the end of the week. Because most people crave the instant reassurance of the dollar in hand, they cling to their buckets like a lifeline, even as it slowly drains their future and leaves them at 60 years of age with nothing but a worn-out frame. But here is the moment of truth. If your income is tied to your effort, you will always be limited by your effort. If your income is tied to your systems, you will grow beyond the limits of time and space. Systems do more than generate gold. They protect and multiply your most precious and non-renewable resource, time. Time is the great equalizer of the race. The pauper and the millionaire each receive the same 24 hours. Yet, how is it that the builder feels his life is overflowing with space, calmness, and opportunity, while the laborer feels he is drowning in a sea of demands? It is the presence or absence of organized systems. Systems create time by performing the work for you. While others are stuck responding to every frantic demand of the hour, the builder is creating a life that responds for him. This is why true wealth feels calm. It is not about the luxury of the surroundings, but about the relief from the constant, agonizing need to keep running just to stay in place. Systems turn life from a struggle for survival into a state of sovereignty. To build wealth, you must stop thinking like a worker who asks, "How much can I earn today?" and start thinking like a designer who asks, "What can I build today that will earn for me every day after this?" The shift does not require a genius-level intellect or a great inheritance. It requires only the awareness of the law. Once you begin to look at the world through the lens of systems, you will see them everywhere, in every successful franchise, in every automated rolling mill, in every investment portfolio that compounds in the dark. You simply haven't been building them for yourself yet because you were too busy carrying buckets. You do not need millions to begin your first system. You need only time, consistency, and the courage to start on a small and manageable scale. A small machine tended with the grip of a focused mind will eventually become a massive engine. People often underestimate what they can build in a single year of consistent system design, but they overestimate what they can earn in one day of frantic effort. This is why the systems builder always wins the long race. There is, however, an uncomfortable truth you must face. Systems require the letting go of immediate control. Effort feels safe because you are holding the bucket. Systems feel uncertain in the beginning because you are building something that must eventually operate without you. But freedom requires the courage to let go of the handle. You cannot hold everything and own everything at the same time. You must release the belief that you must do everything yourself and that hard work alone is the path to the summit. When you release these archaic beliefs, you become free to create. You are no longer a worker in the mill of life. You are the owner of the mill. Work with intention, work with foresight, and work only on things that continue to work when you are gone. This is the first law of the empire of business. Effort creates moments of pay, but systems create a lifetime of freedom.
If you have resolved to walk as a master of industry and an architect of systems, you must now understand that the most valuable capital you will ever possess is not held in the vaults of a bank, nor is it measured in the tonnage of a steel mill, nor in the vast acreage of a real estate holding. Your primary capital, the very gold bullion of your existence, is the quality and the discipline of your own thought. You must guard the gates of your mind with the same unyielding military vigilance that a king guards his crown or a banker protects his reserves from the hand of the thief. Thought is the seat of all authority in human affairs. It is the silent, invisible engine that drives the great wheels of commerce, progress, and civilization. If your thought is polluted by the trivialities of the crowd, the toxins of fear, or the debilitating habit of short-term gratification, your actions will inevitably betray you. Most men do not fall because of a lack of opportunity or a sudden turn of the market. They fall because their thinking was unguarded and their mental treasury was left unlocked. They permit every suggestion of failure to enter their mental sanctum. They allow the idle gossip of the street, the pessimistic headlines of the press, and the complaints of the mediocre to rewrite their internal laws. They open the gates of their inner world to the chaotic noise of the outer world, and then wonder why their power fades, why their resolve withers, and why they remain in the shackles of the wage earner. But the man who has been sent, the man who walks as if the very voice of divine intelligence speaks through his capacity for reason, does not treat his thoughts casually. He treats them as sacred property. He disciplines them. He commands them. He directs them toward a singular, definite purpose with the precision of a master engineer calibrating a locomotive. Time is the most mysterious currency in human life. A currency that is issued to every man in equal measure, but spent with vastly different degrees of wisdom. While the common man measures time in hours, asking, "How long must I labor to receive my pay?" the wealthy man measures time in outcomes and compounding interest. He asks, "How long will this labor pay me after it is finished?" This shift, subtle yet profound, is what creates the invisible divide between those who merely survive and those who accumulate an enduring freedom. Time is not something you merely have, it is something you deploy as a strategic resource. Every deployment of an hour has a consequence that ripples through the decades.
Every hour you spend performing a task that does not compound, a task that pays once and then dies, is an hour gone forever, along with all the potential opportunities that lived inside that time. Money returns to the man of industry, but time never returns to the man of drift. When you understand this, your relationship with the clock undergoes a radical transformation. You stop asking how much you can earn today and start asking what you can build today that will continue to earn while you sleep, while you rest, and while you attend to the higher duties of life. The rich do not merely manage time, they multiply it through the creation of systems and the acquisition of assets. If a person with a worker's mindset earns only when they are physically present, their 24 hours produce only 24 hours of value. But a person with a builder's mindset can turn 1 hour of strategic design into hundreds of hours of output through the leverage of automation, intellectual property, and the labor of capital. This is how the wealthy live outside the boundaries of time, while others age into a state of permanent tiredness. The danger for the aspiring man of mark is not found in working hard, for hard work is a prerequisite, but in the hidden cost of the good enough. The real danger lies in spending your best years on tasks that never grow, tasks that do not build an enduring infrastructure, and tasks that pay a simple wage and never again. Most people live in a loop of temporary results. Today's work leads to today's pay, which leads to tomorrow's pressure to repeat the cycle. They never stop to question the astronomical cost of this loop. But the wealthy know a truth that the masses never discover. A life powered by tasks can never create freedom, for tasks are finite and exhausting. Only a life powered by systems can create the calm and the dignity of the industrial sovereign. Every year you spend working without building is a year you have paid for only once. Every year you spend building systems is a year that will pay you and perhaps your progeny forever. This is why some men work for 4 decades and never advance beyond their station, while others work for a few focused, concentrated years and unlock a lifetime of independence. The difference is not found in luck or in pull. It is found in the way they deploy their time. The rich understand that compounding is not merely a financial concept for the ledger. Its true magic lies in the compounding of time invested into systems. 1 hour spent building a digital asset or a mechanical process can pay dividends for 10 years. 1 hour spent setting up an automated distribution can save 1,000 hours in the future. The wealthy do not ask, "What does this hour pay?" They ask, "What does this hour build?" And that question, repeated daily, is the architect of a destiny. You must therefore master the virtue of patience, for compounding is a slow and silent miracle that hides its power in the early stages of the journey. It is like the planting of a slow-growing oak. For many months nothing appears above the soil, and the casual observer might assume the effort was in vain. But beneath the surface, the roots are establishing a structure that will eventually support a massive canopy. Most people quit before the compounding begins because they crave the instant dopamine of the small result. They abandon their systems right before the curve of growth begins to bend upward towards the heavens. But the man of mark stays the course. He masters repetition. He masters consistency. He understands that consistency is the quiet architect of freedom. He does not live in a state of short-term reaction to the fires of the present. He lives in a state of long-term intention. He protects his focus, declines distractions, and chooses depth over noise. He thinks in decades, not in days. To him, the present hour is not a burden to be endured, but a seed to be planted. What you build today, or what you fail to build, becomes the cold reality of your tomorrow. The moment you shift from being a time consumer to a time investor, you have taken the first step toward the summit of the empire of business. This is the mental law that separates financial stagnation from financial creation. Use your time to build what creates more money,
rather than using your time to do what requires more of your time. This is the supremacy of the mental treasury.
Before you can hope to construct the massive edifices of wealth that pay you in perpetuity, you must first master the true industrial definition of an asset. You must move beyond the textbook simplifications repeated by the clerk and the bookkeeper and grasp the essential energy that a real asset carries. In the empire of business, an asset is not merely a possession, it is a specialized tool of production that possesses its own motive power. Most men fail in the pursuit of wealth because they lack the clarity to distinguish between a true asset and a shiny liability. They confuse busyness with progress and the display of status with the accumulation of stability. They purchase items that scream for attention, fine carriages, ostentatious dwellings, and the fleeting trends of the day, believing that these marks of consumption will somehow produce a future harvest. But a liability remains a drain upon your mental and financial treasury, no matter how much it impresses the neighbors. True assets are quiet. They do not require your constant applause or your physical presence to perform their duty. They work silently, faithfully, and endlessly in the background of your life. To understand wealth is to understand the asset equation. An asset is that which puts money into your life, while a liability is that which takes money out of it. This sounds simple, yet simplicity is the ultimate sophistication in business. If the money flows toward you after the acquisition, you have built a pillar of freedom. If the money flows away from you, you have merely fashioned a new set of golden shackles. Why do the masses so consistently mistake liabilities for assets? It is because society, in its current state of drift, sells comfort rather than freedom. The average man buys things to feel a sense of importance today, whereas the man of mark buys things to live as a sovereign tomorrow. Liabilities are often visible and loud. A luxury item turns heads in the street, but a dividend-paying stock or a well-managed rolling mill whispers its value only to the ledger. The wealthy choose the whispering assets over the screaming liabilities every time. They make financial decisions based on the cold, mathematical reality of value flows, not on the impulsive whims of emotion. Every asset that pays you forever fits into a distinct hierarchy, and once you master these categories, the accumulation of wealth becomes as predictable and repeatable as the laws of physics. First, there are assets that produce immediate cash flow, the heartbeat of financial independence. These are the rental properties, the shares in great industrial concerns, the digital products, and the automated stores that send revenue to your door quarterly and annually. Whether you are laboring at your desk, resting by the hearth, or traveling the continent, these assets do not cease their production. People who rely solely on a salary live in a state of perpetual underlying fear, for they are always one season away from want. But the man who relies on cash-flowing assets lives with the quiet confidence of the master. The second tier of the hierarchy belongs to assets that appreciate over time, the silent multipliers of your estate. These are the lands in the path of progress, the index funds that track the growth of the nation's industry, and the intellectual property that gains traction with each passing year. You do not see the power of appreciation in the daily fluctuations of the ticker, but over the span of decades and generations, it transforms the modest saver into a long-term owner of the earth. Appreciation turns time into your most loyal ally instead of your most terrifying enemy. Finally, there are the assets of protection and stabilization, the walls and shields of your empire. These include gold, government bonds, and legal trusts designed to ensure that what you have built cannot be dissipated by a single storm or a lapse in judgment. No empire survives without its defenses. Wealth that is not protected is wealth that is merely waiting to disappear.
The complete equation of wealth is simple. Cash flow plus appreciation plus protection equals forever money. This is the architecture behind every fortune that has stood the test of time. You need all three to be truly unshakable, but you must start with the first. Cash-flowing assets provide the fuel that funds your expansion into the other two. The struggle to build real assets is rarely a struggle of resources, it is a struggle of identity. You must stop identifying as a consumer and start identifying as a creator and a proprietor. The wealthy see every dollar as a decision, every skill as potential equity, and every idea as the raw material for a new system. They ask questions the clerk never thinks to ask. What can I turn this into? How can I make this work for me? How can I multiply this resource instead of merely spending it? They understand that money is not meant to be held in a static state. It is meant to be deployed as an active soldier in the field of commerce. True wealth comes from the principle of ownership, owning more than you earn. Ownership is what pays you forever. It is what outlives your physical labor and provides for your progeny. Whether it is owning a process, a platform, a product, or a distribution channel, your life must become a pursuit of ownership rather than a pursuit of income. From this hour forward, every time you consider an expenditure, you must put it to the test. Does this feed my future or does it drain my present? Is this something I shall own or is it something that will own me? These questions are the compass that will guide you away from the reefs of temporary excitement and toward the harbor of permanent prosperity. Wealth is not a matter of luck, it is a matter of philosophy in physical form. You are now ready to take the final step, to start small and build with intention, for wealth is built not by the rich, but by the intentional who refuse to remain poor.
The final and most profound stage of the wealth builder's journey is not found in the mere accumulation of figures in a ledger, nor in the pride of possession, but in the solemn stewardship of that which you have created. You must understand that wealth, in its truest form, behaves like a living energy. It moves with an irresistible force toward order, and it dissipates with equal speed when confronted by chaos, neglect, or a lack of purpose. Many men labor a lifetime to build a fortune, only to see it vanish in a single generation because they failed to understand that the creation of wealth is only the beginning of the man of affairs' duty. Mastery begins when you learn to protect what you have built with the same grip with which you acquired it, and then to extend its impact far beyond the narrow horizon of your own physical life. Wealth without protection is a fragile thing, susceptible to the rust of inflation, the rot of poor judgment, and the storms of economic upheaval. Wealth without expansion becomes a stagnant pool that eventually breeds the parasites of laziness and entitlement. And wealth without a moral purpose, a gospel to guide its distribution, disappears into the void of insignificance. This final chapter is not about earning more. It is about becoming the kind of architect who designs a structure capable of supporting the race for centuries to come. To protect and expand your empire, you must recognize that money is not a trophy to be held, but a sacred tool that requires a rigid structure. The first layer of this protection is psychological. Fear, greed, impulsiveness, and the ignorance of the laws of capital are the four silent enemies that have eroded more fortunes than any war or famine. They sabotage the decisions of the weak-minded and push the drifter into choices that cost him years of progress. To protect your wealth, you must first protect the sanctuary of your mind. You must take the long view, seeing beyond the frantic excitement of the current hour to consider the arc of decades and generations. When you operate from a position of calm rather than urgency, your judgment becomes as sharp as a diamond.
You stop chasing the get-rich-quick phantoms of the speculator, and you stop reacting to every fluctuation of the ticker. Wealth stays where the mind is steady and where the purpose is fixed. Once this internal shield is forged, the second layer of protection is the architecture of the law. Every meaningful asset, be it a rolling mill, a block of real estate, or a library of intellectual property, must be insulated by strategic and financial boundaries. The wealthy do not rely on the fickleness of luck. They rely on the certainty of legal and financial engineering. They design their systems to withstand the storms of a century long before a single cloud appears on the horizon. But protection alone is the work of the miser. Expansion is the work of the sovereign. To expand your wealth is to understand that money grows only in an environment of high intention and constant evolution. Expansion requires the courage to reinvest your surplus into new technologies, new markets, and higher forms of leverage. If you cling to the methods of the past, you limit the growth of the future. Wealth responds to the man who is willing to grow alongside it. Every dollar you deploy sends a signal to the universe. It is either a signal to multiply or a signal to diminish. Expansion begins when you consistently choose the path of direction over the path of distraction. This is not a reckless pursuit, but a strategic deployment. It comes from studying where the hand of progress is moving and placing your capital in its path. When your wealth begins to circulate with a moral purpose, founding libraries, endowing schools, or improving the conditions of the laboring man, it gains an exponential momentum that the selfish can never grasp. The deepest form of this expansion is generational. Generational wealth is not merely about leaving a pile of gold to your heirs. Indeed, I have often said that a heavy inheritance is a leaden weight that prevents a young man from rising. Real generational wealth is the transfer of the capacity for mark, the mindset, the knowledge, the discipline, and the unyielding industry that created the wealth in the first place. Legacy is not built by giving your descendants money they have not earned. It is built by giving them the understanding of how money flows and how systems are designed. Your heirs must learn the road to business success from the bottom up. They must understand how assets behave, how to think in decades, and how to avoid the traps of the idle rich. You do not pass on wealth by transferring a bank account. You pass on wealth by transferring a perspective. When you think of your wealth as energy, you no longer ask, how much do I have? But rather, where is this energy flowing? What future is it manufacturing? Energy amplifies intention. If your intention is to improve the state of the race, your wealth will multiply with a divine purpose. As the architect of generational wealth, your role is to shape, to design, and to build structures that continue to create value even in your absolute absence. A trust, a portfolio, a foundation, a philosophy, each of these is a pillar that supports the weight of the future. You become the source from which progress continues long after you have been laid to rest. And here is the great paradox of the gospel of wealth. The more you build for the benefit of others, the more your own wealth expands and takes on a life of its own. Wealth that is hoarded becomes a stagnant weight. Wealth that is shared with wisdom becomes an exponential force for good. As you conclude this audiobook, let the lessons of the empire of business settle into your very bones. Wealth is not built in a rush of emotion. It is built in the quiet, persistent decisions of a man who knows his duty. You now understand that freedom is not a fantasy reserved for the lucky few, but a mathematical structure that any man of character can build. Your assets are no longer distant concepts. They are the seeds you can plant this very hour. You do not need to transform your life overnight. You only need to begin one habit, one investment, and one system that honors your future more than your present fears. Stay connected to these laws of industry, for every week your mind must be sharpened by new strategies of achievement. Your future is already opening, and your wealth is already awakening. Tonight, as you rest, let every lesson remind you of the one absolute truth of your existence. You were never meant to be a servant to the clock. You were meant to be the master of the system. You were not meant to survive. You were meant to build. The furnace is hot, the ore is pure, and the command has been given. Go forth and walk as one who has been sent. The world awaits its new sovereign, and that sovereign is the man who obeys the law of the asset.